Hello, guys. Welcome to my very first YouTube live session. I don't know what you want to call it. We'll call it a session. We had an opportunity today in class to really cover a lot of material. Let me take care of Queen here. But yeah, we had a really special opportunity to cover a lot of material today in class. And I know one area that I didn't necessarily get an opportunity to address today was the Middle Colonies. And so I told you that I told the classes today that I would definitely put something down in video format so that you can go by, you can log in, follow me on YouTube, follow my channel, Michael Gillette, on my channel, and what's gonna happen throughout this session this evening, you're gonna hear my stupid dog Shiner back here barking because I've got a box of treats. I keep it in my Tiffany's box here, and these dogs come into my office and they just absolutely go nuts. So they'll bark at me until I give them treats. So you'll just have to pardon me. I will fuss at them a little bit, but you see what I'm saying? So what I have to do is I have to reach over. Okay. I got to get the treat. There you go. So he'll go run off, and 5 minutes later he'll come and he'll bark at me again. So that's kind of what happens this year. But what I wanted to do tonight is really kind of get the ball rolling on this YouTube Live by getting into the Middle Colonies. And looking at the Middle Colony, or the Southern and New England colonies this morning in class. Remember, our job for the AP exam and for Friday's exam and Monday's exam is for you to be able to answer the question, what made each region of the American colonies, the English colonies, what made each region distinctive from each other? Okay, and so what the areas we need to look at, and you need to be able to examine, because on the on the old AP exams and the redesigned AP exams, the students' ability to compare, comparison is an important historical thinking skill that students must master in APUSH. And so, being able to compare the various regions will be something you will need to be able to do really for both AP exams and, of course, our major exam coming up at the end of this week. So areas of analysis, number one would be governmental structure. Two would be their religious affiliations, the degree of religious toleration, the degree of religious diversity. Number three would be level of education, education systems. Four, the economy. Five, geography. I would argue that geography is probably one of the most important factors that contributed to the uniqueness and distinctiveness of each region. Okay. Also, we look at social structure. Look at their social stratification, their social classes, role of women, relations with Indians would be another one, because each region had a distinctive relationship with the local natives, contact with. And so to really get us going, the Middle Colonies, or the Mid-Atlantic colonies, okay, they were known for, we'll kind of get into a basic description of, sorry, hold on a second. Get away. Go. Okay. So to a basic description of the Middle Colonies. And so First of all, the Middle Colonies, we're talking about New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey. The majority of them, 3 of the 4, would be what we call Quaker colonies, largely established by Quakers, and New York being the lone exception. New York traces its roots to the Dutch. Of course, it's the Dutch who, hold on a second. Let me check this out real quick. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. So, so the Dutch, of course, will establish a foothold in the Middle Colonies in New York in the early 1600s. In the first decade of the 1600s, a sailor by the name of Henry Hudson will be employed by the Dutch in order to make a contact with the British North America, with that region, the Mid-Atlantic region of what is now the 13 colonies. He will, in 1609, he will sail up into Delaware and into the New York bays. He will sail up the Hudson River and really help lay claim to what the Dutch will call New Netherlands. New Netherlands will ultimately be founded on the Hudson River by the 1620s, and New York, they will establish a trade outpost in what is considered today as New York City. At the time, they called it New Amsterdam. And of course, when we look at the Dutch influence, the Dutch weren't, they didn't have a very long presence in America, but they did leave behind a significant, there was a legacy. There's definitely a Dutch legacy left behind in New York. And really one of the major ones is that when you look at New York was very, it was a lot more aristocratic than what you found in the other Middle Colonies. In the Quaker colonies, there was a greater sense of equality. It's remember in class, we really addressed in the Albion Seed article, the Quaker concept of liberty. Well, the New Yorkers didn't really share the Quaker sensibilities when it came to equality. They practiced very little religious toleration, very little free speech, and of all the northern colonies, New York was the most reluctant to adopt democratic principles. So it was very, very aristocratic. You had an aristocratic landowning structure in which a very small percentage of aristocrats really owned and really controlled the political and economic life of New Netherlands. Okay. But ultimately, what we're going to have in the 1620s, 1630s, and ultimately in the 1640s, there's going to be a major power struggle between the Dutch and the English. The Dutch and the English will fight a series of wars, which ultimately will culminate in the defeat of New Netherlands, and England will lay claim to. It will become actually a royal colony of England by the 1680s. Okay, so by the 1680s. So by the 1680s, and of course, New Netherlands will be renamed after the Duke of York of England. It would be called New York, and New Amsterdam would be renamed to New York City. Okay, so yeah, so ultimately, like I said, by the 1660s, you're going to have the English are going to take control of New York. Now, ultimately, one of the things that important with New York, other than its autocratic, aristocratic nature, is that because of their strong sense of because of that strong aristocratic feel, there will be a significant rebellion that'll take place in 1691 amongst the discontented poor white landowner, or they weren't really even landowners, but the poor white farmers in New York. And that would be called Leisler's Rebellion. Leisler's Rebellion in 1691. Combination of poor whites and farmers rose up against the New York government, and though it failed, and Leisler and many of his followers would be hanged, you're going to see the divvying up of large land estates and into smaller parcels of land to be occupied by common farmers. And so because of Leisler's Rebellion, New York ultimately became less aristocratic, and there's more sharing. There will be more sharing of power. Okay. Also, another note card term relating to New York would be the 1683 Chapter of Liberties. Chapter of Liberties granted freedom of religion. It gave all landowners the right to vote, and so that was a very important step for the establishment of democracy in New York. Okay, but really, one of the things we talk about in class is that when it comes to not only the preparation of this test coming up, but also in preparation for the AP exam, that when it comes to understanding the 13 colonies and the 3 regions, that I really want you to really identify one colony from each region and just make sure you know them inside and out. And so if the Middle Colonies were largely Quaker, then that leads us, really honestly, that really leads us to really analyze in detail a colony that was founded in 1681, and that would be the colony of Pennsylvania. And so, we talk about the Quakers and the Albion Sea. The Quakers were nonconformists in nature. They were more radical in their defense of religious liberty than the Puritans were. They really were they were known to oppose authority. We talk about them being rebels. They hated paying taxes, especially in order to support the Church of England. They had really a strong sense of equality. They shared they didn't have much of a rigid power structure. Okay, but they were simple. They were democratic. They sought religious and civic freedom for all people. They believed in that all men were equal in God's eyes. They believed in what was called this inner light theology. And with inner light theology, they believed, for example, that that within every human being there's this divine spark, and that and people should follow that. And I like to oftentimes call it your gut. It's following your gut. That when you have a gut feeling about something, that's actually something that is coming, that's inspired from God, and that should be listened to, and it should not nonetheless be ignored. And so, of course, Pennsylvania will be established by William Penn. William Penn is going to gain a huge tract of land from the king in repayment for money, a debt that the king owed his father. And so ultimately, Pennsylvania is established as a as a haven for Catholic or for Quakers. You know, the Quakers, because of their rebellious nature, because of their nonconformity, they were a persecuted religious group back in England. And so William Penn saw an opportunity to be able to establish a safe haven for Quakers in Pennsylvania. His secondary motive is he really wanted to experiment with this idea of what's called, and this is a note card term, with what's called the Holy Experiment. In other words, he wanted to turn Pennsylvania into the most tolerant, the most diverse, the most ethnically diverse, diversity in religion, religious diversity of any place in the world. In fact, William Penn, his followers actually walked the streets of Europe, handing out pamphlets, trying to draw different people, trying to encourage people to move and immigrate to Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania was very well advertised, and because of that, Pennsylvania will attract a very large number of Germans, Dutch, French, Scots-Irish become a very large group, Welsh, Swedes, Scots Highlanders, and so quite a few folks from many, and what they promised these people, the Quakers promised cheap land, freedom of religion, and they represented democracy. So, and these were all very attractive ways to get people to want to immigrate to the not to the United States, but to Pennsylvania. And so, in doing so, Pennsylvania offered, they not only through their land policies, not only did they attract immigrants from many different backgrounds, but they were also very successful in attracting carpenters, masons, shoemakers, and other manual workers. And together, the people of the Middle Colonies, the people of Pennsylvania, became extremely diverse. We would almost call it a melting pot. We use the term melting pot, but they were very hardworking, and Pennsylvania became a huge success. Part of the success that Pennsylvania enjoyed was its peaceful relations with the natives, with Native Americans. In fact, Pennsylvania fur traders are going to work very well with Native American groups in Pennsylvania to successfully harvest fur. And so they're very successful in establishing a very strong democratic form of government, in which landowners and church members possess the right to vote. They established a system where taxes did not go to support any one church, and so it was a very unique place. I mean, there's no place on planet Earth that was that was like Pennsylvania. So by 1700, Pennsylvania becomes the fourth largest colony, and the Quakers were very successful businessmen, very successful farmers. Of course, the farmers were farming was the backbone of the Pennsylvania economy. Pennsylvania was known as a bread colony, known for the harvesting, the production of grains, and that became one of the #1 exports out of Pennsylvania. And so, and a lot of the people who moved to Pennsylvania, who immigrated to Pennsylvania from Europe, were farmers anyway. And so farming became a very important activity. Now, also another calling card of the Quakers would be the fact that they were very strong advocates of equality. I know we discussed this in class with Albion C, but we do see established a strong tradition in Pennsylvania of opposing slavery and any forms of servitude. So now, William Penn's experiment in religious toleration and ethnic diversity was called the Holy Experiment. Holy Experiment. That's one of your note card terms. And so, so that became one of the. That would be a great term used to describe Pennsylvania, because in many ways he was experimenting with something that was really unprecedented. This idea of attracting such a diverse population, like New England. The people of Pennsylvania, the people of the Middle Colonies, also governed through the town hall meeting, and being that there was a greater sense of equality in the Middle Colonies, you did see the sharing of a lot of power within that democracy, that democratic form of government. And so ultimately, one of the more significant, cities in the English colonies would be Philadelphia. Philadelphia, of course, is the Quaker capital. Philadelphia is also one of the most significant port cities. Philadelphia is where that grain export economy, the hub of that grain export economy, will derive from. Of course, Pennsylvania, we know down the road, Philadelphia becomes very important, especially once we get into the Revolution and beyond. Philadelphia becomes in earnest, but essentially the first capital of the United States. And so, but that's about it. That's about it for the Middle Colonies. And so, again, what I would do is really, I think you have to understand that New York isn't really like the other Middle Colonies. In fact, New York is really not like many of the other northern colonies. New York has really more in common with the South than it does its neighbors in the North. But with the Mid-Atlantic colonies, the Middle Colonies, really want to focus in on Pennsylvania and the Quakers and who the Quakers are, and really think about the uniqueness of the type of colony that they established, and how really there's no other place in the world that has this level of diversity and toleration that we have in Pennsylvania. So yeah, so I think that's going to be the end of our first ever YouTube event, and so expect future events. And I'm going to learn how to incorporate my PowerPoints and be able to show documents as we go through the content of the course. So thank you very much for your attention, and you guys have a beautiful day.